Good afternoon. My name is Barry Feldman, and I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, a longtime member of the Board of Directors of American Friends of Magen David Adom. It's great to be able to welcome you all today, despite what is unquestionably trying times in Israel. Last week, I returned from a sensational visit to Israel. While I was there, it was delightful to see the country reopening in so many ways and being able to relax its COVID restrictions after Israel's world-leading COVID vaccination initiative, a program in which our Magen David Adom played such an integral role. Restaurants and bars were booming. I even enjoyed a tour of the Marcus Blood Center. It's unfortunate this return to normal life is so short-lived, as Israelis once again are living in fear and uncertainty. This time, however, the airborne danger isn't a virus, but Hamas rockets and affecting Israeli citizens and civilians. Today, we'll talk about how Magen David Adom is responding to the rocket crisis and how it prepares for these various types of scenarios. We'll also touch on how this culture of preparedness enabled Magen David Adom to respond quickly to the Mount Meron tragedy 2 weeks ago, mitigating what could have been an even larger disaster. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dan Raviv, who will serve as our moderator today. David Horowitz, who originally was scheduled to moderate this event, has agreed to join us in a different capacity and provide us with some background and updates on the current conflict with Hamas, as well as the riots that have broken out in cities across Israel. Let me extend our thanks to both Dan and David for joining us today. And now let me introduce our moderator, Dan Raviv. Dan is a native of New York and a Harvard graduate. During his 40 years with CBS News, Dan Raviv reported on historic events in the Middle East and in Europe, and was senior Washington correspondent for Israel-based I-24 News. He is the author of several books on Israeli diplomacy and security, most recently, Spies Against Armageddon, as well as Comic Wars, on how a pair of Israeli Americans rescued Marvel Entertainment. And in 1990, the best-selling Every Spy a Prince, The Complete History of Israel's Intelligence Community, co-authored with journalist Yossi Melman. Dan and his wife Dori and his grown children and families all now reside in Washington, D.C. It is now my pleasure to turn over today's program to Dan Raviv. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barry Feldman, and thanks for all you do for the American Friends of Magen David Adom. I'd like to say it's a pleasure to be with everyone who is watching, but the pleasure is very muted today. Israel is, frankly, at war, whether or not it's called a war by everybody. Of course, the enemies, mostly in Gaza, the radicals of Hamas have been attacking Israel. Israel's been striking back. And so just to give you an idea of the people you'll hear from during this program, during this hour, I'll just introduce them. And when I say your names, just everyone just, say hello or shalom. That way the Zoom camera will come on, to you and just raise your hand so we'll know who you are. So you will be meeting David Horowitz, who is the founding editor of the Times of Israel, one of the most widely read news sites if you want to know what's happening in Israel and the Middle East. He's the author of Still Life with Bombers, A Little Too Close to God. In the past, David was the editor of the Jerusalem Post and Jerusalem Report. You'll get a lot of news and background again at timesofisrael.com. Yoni Yagodovsky, you are Director of International Relations for Magen David Adom, formerly a paramedic and Regional Director of MDA's Jerusalem region during the Second Intifada. So I know, Yoni, you've seen many multi-casualty incidents, and Israel is suffering quite a few of them right now. Guy Caspi, thank you. Guy Caspi, you're a paramedic and the Chief Multi-Casualty Instructor for Magen David Adom. in charge of training and preparedness, ensuring that MDA paramedics and EMTs are ready for virtually any emergency. Moti Shuv, I know you're in the field right now in Ashkelon, and that there have been incoming rockets. Yeah, there you are. Wow, see you wearing the helmet for your protection. A paramedic with Magen David Adom based in Ashkelon, being less than 20 miles from the Gaza Strip. There have been many rocket hits there, including in the past hour. Dr. Roy Babila, a physician who does volunteer shifts as an MDA first responder. I know, Dr. Babila, you have ridden your MDA motorcycle to the scenes of medical emergencies, and you were staffing MDA's mobile clinic at the Mount Meron event. That was less than 2 weeks ago on a Thursday night. 45 people at the Lag BaOmer celebrations died in a terrible crush. The MDA was so important, rescuing people, keeping people alive. We'll hear about that. Dor Kainan, an EMT with Magen David Adom. You also were on the scene in Mount Meron, treated many of the injured in very difficult circumstances. And Uriel Goldberg, a paramedic with MDA, been working hard this week, I know, an immigrant from Britain, working with MDA's International Relations Department. Hi, Uriel. So there'll be an opportunity for you in the audience to ask questions. We'll put them to our panelists in the second half of this hour. Just type them into the Q&A panel on your Zoom screen, right? Not the chat, look for the Q&A panel. Okay, let's begin. There's a lot to cover. David Horovitz, can we focus somehow on the impact of what I'm calling Israel at war, but especially on Israeli civilians? It's sad to say that in the south of the country, near the Gaza Strip, which Israel left back in 2005, there have been a lot of rocket attacks, but now the center of the country, I think in the Tel Aviv, Jerusalem sector, this is new and this is really tough on your fellow Israelis. David?
Hi, Dan. Hi, everybody. I'm very privileged to be on the call. I'm sorry that Magen David Adom's emergency rescue work never seems to end. You're right, Dan. So I'll try and bring you up to speed as succinctly as possible. This is a case of the Israeli citizenry, the civilians being on the front line. There have been something like 1,200 projectiles fired at Israel in, it's basically 50 hours since Hamas opened fire with a barrage towards Jerusalem on Monday afternoon. The army is trying to stop the rocket launches. We have an Iron Dome system, which is not quite hermetic, but fairly astonishing, that intercepts the vast majority of rockets that are heading towards civilian areas, but some do get through, and shrapnel gets through, and bits of interceptor and so on. There's an incident just now in the last few minutes, quite a serious incident with one person at least seriously wounded at Sderot, which is right on the edge of Gaza. One of my sons went to school there. We're talking really very, very short distances. And last night we saw the heaviest rocket barrages that anyone can remember at central Israel, including Tel Aviv. 2 sets, really. The airport was briefly closed. That's what's playing out here. Why is it happening? Because Hamas, which is the terrorist ruler of Gaza, is essentially trying to assert itself as the prime Palestinian force. It's trying to marginalize other forces. It has set itself up as the champion of Jerusalem. This conflict began with a Hamas ultimatum telling Israel to take its forces off the Temple Mount, the holiest place in Judaism and the site of the 3rd most holy Islamic shrine, where there has been friction and some violence. Israel, of course, was not about to do that. And we're now in the situation where, as the head of the Shin Bet, Israel's intelligence agency, put it last night, the situation where a terrorist organization, insufferably, as he said, is trying to threaten Israel. And Israel is doing its best to defang that threat. And the citizens are suffering.
Thank you, David. And if we think back to the events of the last week, a lot of this has been in the news on international channels, that East Jerusalem was the focus. There was an argument over, there still is, over property rights. Do we date it back to 1948 or before, or 1967? Jewish owners, Palestinian Arabs living there. They claim they're being forced out wrongly. So that was in the news. No one knew that would blow up into this, something that has caused so much violence. But as David was reporting to you, apparently Hamas in Gaza has decided they'll be the big heroes of the Palestinians. So when did Magen David Adom know that this would be so big and so challenging? I think that's a good question for you, Yoni Yagodovsky. At what point did you know this could be big, or do you have to be ready, Yoni, no matter what?
Well, it was pretty much an awkward situation. I must say that we knew there was a high level of tension over the last few weeks with regards to a variety of issues with the Palestinians, etc. But and there was a sense of kind of alertness. There were more and more events of hostility and so on between Arabs and Jews in various places, a few more terror attacks, stabbings, etc. So there was a tendency or a feeling that we might be going the wrong way, let's say. And Magen David Adom learned from our experience and, of course, had a lot of consultation with other authorities in Israel in order to take the proper measurements in uplifting the level of alertness and doing a variety of things. And we also, this week was the beginning of the national month emergency exercise in Israel. So that altogether was part of our overall preparedness for the exercise itself. So altogether it mixed up with this current situation.
Yeah, I see, Yoni. You were going to be ready no matter what, drills, exercises, and how quickly they turn into reality. In fact, let's let reality intrude right now. Moti Shuv, if you can turn on your microphone, maybe your camera. You're in Ashkelon, and perhaps not everybody knows that when rockets or pieces of rockets from up above hit houses, residences, Israeli citizens, Magen David Adom, where you are right now, right? You and your colleagues are going, what, house to house to search for survivors and people who need help. I mean, what's happening right now?
Yes, I'm a paramedic, and we are now on a shift. We are in an intensive care unit. This is my driver, Ben Tetro, and Nativ is the medic. We are traveling here in Ashkelon, searching for, not actually for survivors, but searching for the missile hits. Because when the alarm sounds, we are going to a shelter, or when we are on a drive, so we are go out from the vehicle and lay down on the floor and put the hands on the helmet or on the head and wait for the alarms to stop. We hear the blast of the rocket hits, and we are going into the intensive care unit and wait for the dispatcher to send us to a rocket hits scene. So we were like searching from house to house to look where the missile hit. We're going to a building, and when it hits on the building, we are actually searching from the top floor of the building to the lowest floor, and knock every door to see that everyone is okay, because sometimes the missile is getting into the first floor and the highest floor, the penthouse, and goes straight down all over the floors of the building. So we, with the fireworks and the police, and with the home front command, we are reaching every house to see if there is any injuries in the house.
As we hear you work with, well, you're sent by the dispatchers, and we'll talk even later about Magen David Adom's incredible dispatch center, so informed, so well organized, so important. You mentioned that you work with the Home Front Command, so that's part of the Army, the Israel Defense Forces, and with the police, and with the firefighters. And Moti, we would think there's a lot of chaos after a rocket strikes. Is it chaos, or would you say that you at Magen David Adom and the others are are very serious and organized, and you concentrate very well.
There is a chaos, a civilian chaos, because not from us. Like we are very organized. If usually we have only 3 regular ambulances and 1 intensive care unit. Now in the escalation, we have about 5 intensive care units and 17 regular ambulances in Ashkelon. I don't know if they know, but Ashkelon is about 150,000 people, civilians. We are 10 kilometers from Gaza. It's about 8 miles, if I calculate it right. Today and yesterday and the day before, about 200 rockets were sent to our city. This is very not just annoying. It's horrifying. It's terrifying. I have something personal. Okay, I have a dog, and he sounds the alarm and the rocket hits much better than we. So he is very terrifying. He's peeing on the floor, and I can't sit. I don't have kids, right? I'm still single, but any friend of mine that has kids, they are very terrifying, very terrifying. They can hear every motorcycle that they accelerate, or every door is shuttered. It reminds us the alarm and reminds us the rocket hits, and we are just looking at each other and wait for the call from the beeper. I don't know how to say it in English.
Your pager would go off, of course.
Pager, right, pager. Yeah. Okay.
Moti, what that reminds us is there will be post-traumatic stress for sure in just about all the state of Israel. And yes, on the other side in Gaza too, we won't be insensitive to that. This war is hitting civilians. Our focus here is on Magen David Adom's work and trying to keep Israelis alive, find them in the rubble. You know, Uriel Goldberg, I know you do this work as well. Often I hear reports in the Israeli media about people suffering helem, right? That's Hebrew for shock. So even if they haven't been hit by the shrapnel and they're not bleeding, there are people in shock. What does that look like when you get to the scene of a disaster, like a building that collapsed? Uriel?
Oh, first of all, when we talk about people who are suffering from or stress symptoms, it's not just people who are at the scene. Whenever there's a red alert siren sounded across the country, or we receive tens, if not hundreds, of phone calls of people around the country in all different places, even if there was no rocket near them, who either brings back flashbacks or it brings on stress symptoms because of the situation. And whilst it doesn't seem like a serious medical condition, for the person themselves, it's panicking, they're in shock, they don't know what to do, they feel helpless, and it's something which we have to treat the best which we can, like any other call. And if it's at the scene of a rocket attack, where rockets actually landed, we could have a number of people, 6 or 7 people who are injured physically. There could be another 15 or 20 people who are suffering from a stress syndrome, which makes the treatment a lot more difficult and a lot more time consuming. You also have to make sure that the person who's suffering from stress isn't actually suffering from a physical injury as well. So it makes it more of a challenge to provide treatments.
Guy Cosby, you're the chief instructor for Magen David Adom to prepare for multi-casualty events. So if you think back to the past week or so, I don't think we knew that this would erupt into a form of warfare with hundreds of rockets coming in. Tell us frankly, was Magen David Adom prepared? How'd that go?
Yes, period. The question for us is not if, the question is when. So the entire set of mind for us is, first of all, we're saving life in Israel on day-to-day activity, but the incident, whatever it will be, a multi-casualty incident, a hazmat situation, a wartime scenario, or an earthquake, we are getting ready for it. We are getting ready for it using all our employees, volunteers, resources, and preparing ourselves, working together with all the other emergency agencies that were mentioned earlier. And when you talk about scene response, one of the things that we try to teach our people is, first of all, be ready. Be ready all the time, because you don't really know when it's going to catch you. And when you have a scene, it's going to be a chaos. It's going to be a chaotic site, casualties, stress-related casualties. And we, and I as an educator, look on those scenarios and teach my people, our people, to manage within the chaos. Yes, it's chaos, there are casualties, but do what you have been trained to do: save life, coordinate with other agencies, look for the urgent casualties. And to be able to do this, you have to train. You have to train, you have to practice, you have to drill.
Yoni, there's no question that those kind of preparations, including the drills, they eat up resources, right? They cost money. I mean, it's well known that Magen David Adom needs equipment, needs ambulances, the motorcycles, I guess we mentioned. But training, it's a constant cost. But I know that in the end, this isn't about managing money, right? This is about helping Israelis in these times of crisis. So Yoni, like this week, for instance, what happens to the budget? You just have to do what you have to do.
Well, training and exercises are the essence of our work. Without being properly training any type of medical scenario, whether it's respiratory issues, cardiac issues, stroke, trauma, whatever, we have to make sure that any person in Magen David Adom, the tens of thousands of volunteers and employees, are properly trained and also participating in exercises that are simulating a variety of scenarios with our peers, meaning the fire department, the home front command, the police, etc., in order to make sure that once things are happening, we will be ready. And yes, budget issues are always, let's say, accompanying us, and we need to deal with it. Sometimes for certain exercises, we get an allocation that is part of the overall budget, exercise budget. Sometimes it is coming from our own income. And needless to say that our medical equipment, ambulances, medicycles, the new blood services building that we are building, etc., is all coming from donations, especially from the US.
That's a reality. Hannah Ron, you join us as well. I know you're a hematological nurse with Magen David Adom's blood services. We just heard about a project that's fairly new, so important, of course. And think about a week like this. There are people wounded. There are Israelis wounded. Obviously, they need blood. I mean, Hannah, if you're able to tell us what's going on this week from your point of view. Oh, and I may have to turn to Hannah later if she wasn't able to join us at this moment. All right, I'll do it in a moment. And I will gladly repeat the question later. Let's change the focus. Back we were talking about training and preparation, and so I think we can talk to Dr. Babila and Dor Kenan, who had to work on the tragedy at Mount Meron, the Lag BaOmer holiday celebrations in northern Israel. People were crushed in a huge crowd. So many of us know 45 people died. There, of course, were other people injured, still recovering from their injuries. They had to be saved, rescued, kept alive. Dr. Roy Babila, first, if I can ask you, when it comes to training and being ready for it, was that a big part of what happened at Mount Meron earlier in that day, on that Thursday? You were preparing?
Actually, we were prepared in the morning and we were practiced for a massive crucial incident. But from my experience, nothing can prepare you really to such an event. As much as you practice, as much as you have your own protocols, some other protocols, but in the area, in the field, nothing is the same in the practice itself. So we were making practice in the morning, but the event catches like in a boom. It was a very surprise for us because we were taking care in the clinic. I was the head of the clinic, the main clinic of MADA in Meron. And we're taking care about routine medical cases, like asthma attacks, like minor injuries, like the ADO patients. And finally, surprisingly, we find in the walkie-talkie and some other communication events that something is unusual is going on. And we try to prepare for something that is unusual. We take the last patient that in the clinic outside, and suddenly a clinic that is prepared to take care about 10 patients on beds is filling in with many medical staff, with many patients. They put them on the beds, but 10 beds is not enough. And we find many patients on the floor, and the clinic that should take care in the routine about 10 patients, which with routine medical cases, nothing special, and we find ourselves with dozens, like 30 or 40 patients simultaneously.
It's hard to prepare for anything. Dor Kenan, you also were working on the emergency there at Mount Meron. I believe you had to cooperate then with police. Even the military came, eventually using helicopters to get people to hospitals.
Yes.
What do you think when you look back on that less than 2 weeks ago? Was it well organized? I mean, was it crazy and chaos? How do you think about it, Dor?
It is very hard to prepare to something like this. The number of people that was in the scene and the place that on the mountain make it very hard to prepare for it. I think that it was organized how much it can be.
As much as possible. I take your point. But may I ask you, Dor, you were right there. I know Dr. Babila was too. Magen David Adom definitely saved a lot of lives at Har Meron, right? Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
There just would have been no other way for those people to survive after being pulled out of the crush. And let's just check back with Moti, because you are now in the Ashkelon area, where I have to think that with Israel under attack, and your area is close to Gaza. Moti, turn on your mic again and just tell me again, is Magen David Adom saving lives right now, today?
Right now, today, and every day, of course. Just yesterday on 5 a.m., there was an alarm. I was in my house, I was sleeping. I'm a volunteer, by the way. I'm not working at Magen David Adom.
Thank you.
I work at the City Hall. But when I was on my bed, it was an alarm. I sound a fallen rocket. Magen David Adom dispatcher called me and said that there is a direct hit on a civilian building. So I get on my car and drove to the building. It was 3 floors that were hit. One man was severely injured. He had flesh, right? Flashette on his head, and we are taking him. We took him to the hospital, and not me, but in another intensive care unit, they delivered him from Ashkelon's hospital to Soroka Hospital in Be'er Sheva. They have a first level hospital. They have a neuro surgeon, so they can deal with head trauma. Here in Ashkelon, we don't have it. So we drove with him about 1 hour drive to get him to a first level hospital. So
Yeah.
we are saving life every day, all the day. And that's
You know, Guy Cosby, I mean, thanks, Moti. Guy Cosby, I'm thinking that so much of this is like moving pieces and not on a slow moving chessboard, but fast moving, emergency, saving lives. So I think a lot comes down to the dispatch center. It's thought of as perhaps the world's best. How was it developed? How good is it, Guy?
Well, if I will recall the beginning, somewhere at, I don't know, 20 years ago, people were sitting together and try to figure out what we need. And since then, actually, it's an ongoing challenge to build up most, I think, efficient and sophisticated command and control system that actually combine everything, starting with receiving information from the caller using all the channels, cell phone, landlines, automatic calls from cars when they are involved in a car accident. They'll transmit directly to our dispatch without using a phone. After receiving the call, actually, the system will automatically locate the nearest resources, allocate them automatically to the scene, including our first responders like Dr. Babila, our ambulances, and our intensive care units. Meanwhile, the dispatcher is going to use technology to provide pre-arrival guidance to the patient or to the surrounding people. And then when it comes to multi-casualty incidents, the system actually allowing us to track all the resources to build up the situation report, using the reports, using the data that comes out from the scene into the system. Dan, you are muted.
I realized it is really, really important. By the way, a reminder to everyone who's watching, and we're starting to get questions, but you can click Q&A on your Zoom screen and then type a question. And I'm going to pose one right now. And I think I'm going to pose it to Yoni. You're likely to know whether Magen David Adom was briefed by the Israeli government, the defense ministry, the IDF, in advance that it was going to get this big. And I guess coupled with that, whether, frankly, you've had a briefing as to how many more days and weeks of this to expect. Yoni, you got briefings?
Yeah, we are, Magen David Adom is part of the national system, and our representatives from the level of Director General to Operations Division have constant meetings with our peers in different levels in the Israeli government and other Israeli organizations that deals with the safety, security, etc. And according to that, we know what to expect, how to silently change our mode of preparedness or activate it and be ready on time in case something will happen. It is part of the ongoing daily process almost in Israel, in quiet times and needless to say, in times of emergency. That's the way it goes for years and years.
May I ask, therefore, do you know, more or less how many days or weeks this is expected to continue?
Well, that's, I think, is connected mainly to prophecy, and that's not part of our profession, let's say. We know it will take time. We know that eventually there will be some kind of political settlement, security settlement, but until then and after that, we will be ready, because we also know that usually sometimes close to the end of the conflict, there are violent attacks occurring as if kind of to close down the deal. And therefore, we always wait a longer period of time and consult with our peers until we slowly lower down our level of preparedness.
Thank you. Hannah Ran, give me just a thumbs up if that's you that I see and I can question you. Good, thank you. Hannah Ran, you work on the blood services. I understand you're a nurse. So a need for blood during a week like this, I guess it's obvious. How's that going? Do you get Israelis to donate blood, or the blood banks in good condition? Tell me about the big project.
Well, we started off with a low inventory before the Meron incident. And because of the Meron incident, people came and gave blood, which helped us with the inventory. Otherwise, I don't think we would have been ready for what's happening now. I don't know if you know, but the standard protocol for a trauma patient, a badly injured, severely injured patient, and a moderately injured patient is about 7 units of blood for each patient. So we're having enough patients now, or severely bad patients now, and we need the blood for that. I lost you?
We hear you.
Yeah, okay, now.
I think Dan is freeze.
Yeah,
Now it's okay?
we lost Dan.
Yeah, but Hannah, we have you. You can continue.
Until when did you hear me?
Until your last sentence.
Until my last sentence. So as we said, we need a lot of blood, and people are very supportive and really want to come and give blood. And we send out SMS, text messages every day, especially for the O type, because when a trauma patient arrives at the hospital, there's no time to check his blood type. So we need a lot of O blood units.
Thanks so much, and that is part of the reality. By the way, there was a question also from one of our viewers wondering if Magen David Adom also treats Arabs when it comes to Arab citizens of Israel.
Of course they do.
I think why not? Yeah, go ahead.
Of course they do. The Arabs are part of our country, part of the people here in Israel. We don't discriminate between Jews, Arabs. We don't even know who the blood goes to. The hospital treats everyone. We send out blood as the hospitals ask us, and we never know where it goes to. We had cases where donors wanted to give blood to specific people, Arabs or Jews. We just say we can't do that. And if you want to give blood, you give blood to everyone.
David Horowitz, can I just ask you, with your journalist's hat, how do you think Magen David Adom, the MDA, is regarded in Israeli society? You know, when it comes to government isn't always trusted and politicians aren't always trusted. What's your observation on Magen David Adom?
Yeah, I haven't seen a study that included Magen David Adom in its rankings, and there may be some, but I would bet that I mean, it's basically seen as something close to angelic. You know, people who save lives. You know, what Hannah could also have added, not only does Magen David Adom treat everybody, but it is comprised of everybody. You know, the people who work and volunteer for Magen David Adom come from all sectors of society, and it is put it this way, it's certainly far better regarded than politicians, journalists. You know, this is an emergency, life-saving service staffed by heroes, beloved by all Israelis.
Wow. Dr. Roy Babila, you volunteer as well as your usual work as a doctor, how you make a living. So why? And how has that felt for you? You've been in some really difficult situations like Mount Meron.
Again, you ask what?
Why do you volunteer, and how does that feel for you?
Actually, I like to volunteer, and I love my job, and it's for me natural that I will volunteer in my profession. So I have good friends in Magen David Adom that were there before me as a volunteers, and they asked me a few years ago to join them, and I was fortunately agree. I'm very happy to do it. And I try to help as much as possible. And as I said before, not only Tachanat Ramat Gan and the Ramat Gan station, whenever there is a question or asking from the managing of the directors of Magen David Adom to any things that I can help, as a special as a doctor, like big medical securities, for example, Mount Meron or other securities, so I'm joining them, and I try to do my best.
Yeah, and safety and protection incidents. Guy Cosby, what has struck me for many years is though sometimes people who really love Israel and worry about Israel, they think that Israel has become, totally materialistic and nobody cares about the nation and everyone's just trying to get a big car and all that. You know what I mean? You work for an organization that I think represents the best of the country. Tell us frankly, how do you feel about that when you combine volunteers and your staff members? For them, this is not just a job.
It's much, much more than a job. I'll go a little bit into privacy. I started my way in MDA back at 1979 as a youth volunteer. And Yoni is smiling, and I guess others as well, because a lot of our staff members, even in high positions, started their way in MDA as volunteers. And it's kind of, I'll put it this way, as an infections that got you, and it's never cured. Because working in this organization that bring together the entire population of Israel, Arabs, Jews, ultra-religious, other minorities, to the purpose of saving life, it's something that it's hard to describe. And getting this information and adding it to the situation that you're saving lives, and whoever here is with us in the panel that have been in a severe situation when you and your crew made the difference, and somebody is getting back from the dead, literally. It's a feeling that nobody can really describe. And this is, I think, one of the things that motivate us, because I can assure you that it's not the paycheck at the end of the month.
Another question from the audience. Yoni, let me just put this to you as a man in authority at Magen David Adom. The question actually is along the chain during emergencies like this week. As we've heard, from Moti, who's working it in Ashkelon, patients often have to be transported to the best equipped hospitals, which could be in another part of Israel. Has that been something you can do during this emergency with rockets coming down? Or again, your dispatch center has to figure out when is it safe for an ambulance to try to drive, say, toward the Tel Aviv area? How's it done this week?
Well, first, our teams are following safety guidelines, and these safety guidelines, and safety comes first in our activities. They follow up the safety guidelines, and as explained by Moti, they had to, while they were on their way, the siren went on, they had to stop on the side, protect themselves, and then continue onwards. But what we call secondary transportation of patients from one hospital to the other is a known method in Magen David Adom, and sometimes we use it. When we have patients that need definite care in a hospital that had that ability, we have two options. If they are in a life-threatening situation, we first bring them over to the closest hospital, because hospital can do more than us. And we usually pre-inform the hospital about what they expect to receive within a few minutes. They get ready, it's part of the process. If needed, they provide additional treatment to this patient, and then we provide the secondary transportation to the, let's call level 1 trauma center or etc. And it's been going on anytime. When we talk about terror attacks, daily activities, or even now, when there are missile attacks, we do have the tendency to make sure that if we are doing it in a safe manner with minimum risk, not only to our teams, but also a secondary risk to our patients.
One of our viewers in America now asks, what about the transfer sometimes of sick people from Gaza, Palestinian Arabs, and they are brought to the Israeli side and brought to a hospital? First, is MDA involved in that kind of goodwill? But second of all, surely that had to stop this week.
Well, we have been providing humanitarian assistance to people, whoever they are, including extremely sick Palestinians who, after coordination with the hospitals and the Israeli civil administrations, are chosen to receive medical care in Israeli hospitals. Those who are in severe condition are being taken by our mobile intensive care unit after it's been carefully coordinated from the Erez checkpoint, which is in the northeast corner of the Gaza Strip, to Israeli hospitals. And the teams that are, by the way, doing that almost on a daily basis are EMTs and paramedics that are based in Sderot, Mata Station, or in Ashkelon, etc. When at this time, unfortunately, we cannot do it because the situation is completely unsafe. And unfortunately, due to this type of escalation and hostility, we know that there are people out there in Gaza that are now being prevented from the medical care that can be given to them here in Israel.
Dor Kenan, you're based in Afula, more toward the north of Israel. As we said, you were at the Mount Meron disaster. So Dor, you're not near the war zone right now, but I'm just trying to get an idea of the Magen David Adom attitude, where you have to be ready and prepared. Emergencies could happen in the north. Don't want to give the enemies across the border in Lebanon any ideas. Dor,
Yes.
Are you ready? Always ready?
Yes. We always prepared. Sorry, I can't hear the entire question well.
No, you did well. You're always prepared, even if there's a Lebanon border emergency. I hope it doesn't happen, of course.
Yes, we always prepared. Right now, there is a lot of medics in the station, even though the rockets are not in this area. We give backup to other areas.
I understand the coordination is good, right? I mean, as you heard, Dor is in the north, but if the south needs people, supplies, they move, no question. Moti, as sort of our last guest, I'm going to ask Yoni to wind up with some closing remarks, which is great. But Moti, because you're in the field right now, you're a volunteer, you're in Ashkelon. Is anybody getting any sleep? How do you make it this week? Whether it's you as a volunteer or the Magen David Adom employees you see. So Moti, turn on your mic and just tell me a little. How are people operating with so little sleep and rest?
Actually, we hope that it will be. There is an alarm. There is an alarm. Sorry, we need to run to a shelter.
Go take shelter, my friend. Go take shelter.
I'm sorry.
Of course. Well,
turn the question to another.
I sure will. Stay safe. That's the main thing, Moti. Don't forget to turn off your mic.
We just go on shelter now. We have about 30 seconds until the rocket hits. There is an iron dome where we hear the booms. the blast.
Now, generally, if they hear a blast in the distance, they think, good, there's been an interception by the Iron Dome. But even then, pieces can come down. The danger continues. Yes, for sure. And in that area near Gaza, as you said, you only have 30 seconds to seek shelter. Wow. It's not that much.
Yes, even less than 30 seconds. The Iron Dome is it's not perfectly defend. It's about an 80% defend. So that's it. We are out of the shelter. Now, what daily happened? We are waiting for the dispatchers to call us. If civilians call Magen David Adom, it's like the 911 in the USA. Here it's 101. If they call, so we are going to the ambulance and drive to the house that were hit.
That is on the spot.
As you see, there are plenty of teams right here. We are dozens volunteers and motorcycles and intensive care units and ambulances. We are really fully prepared to do everything we need.
You know, thank you, Moti.
Sorry for the adrenaline.
Yeah, thank you.
I was
asking, as you know, how you're getting along with so little sleep, but I think we're seeing the answer. There's the necessity, there's the need, there is the togetherness. I mean, look at the group there together, all feeling they're on one mission, whether they're volunteers or staff members on salaries from Magen David Adom. There's the support from the public we heard about. And frankly, I mean, right now I'm in the comfort of being here in Washington, D.C. So there's the comfort of knowing that we are with them too, as much as we can be. Moti, I can't thank you enough. Yoni,
actually, we are very united. Very united in this kind of situations. Volunteers from other cities came to us to reinforce, and that is really heartwarming.
It is heartwarming.
I'm very glad for this.
Thank you so much, Moti. Yeah, so here's the message again, right? You want to be involved with the good people of Israel who are doing great things? Here you are. Yoni, I pass it to you.
Well, I think that what you saw, what Moti showed you, is our real preparedness. And Magen David Adom, all over the country, is able to respond, is able to do what we are doing in routine and especially now in emergency, because we are prepared, we are ready. And we are prepared because of our supporters from all over the world. Thanks to your support, thanks to your generosity, we have the ambulances, the medicycles, the medical equipment, the medical supplies that we need for the blood services. We are building the new blood bank facility of the State of Israel that is fully protected. And needless to say, we see how important it is now when missiles were thrown towards Tel Aviv, where the current building is. So thank you. You are our partners in the life-saving work that we do here in Israel. Without you, we won't be able to do that. So, and we feel your support. Each time we go on a call, we reach a patient, we try and save a life, we collect blood, we send the blood to the hospitals, we feel your support. And at this time of this crisis, we feel it even stronger and more. So thank you very much. You can always go online to afmda.org and be able to support us in any way you can. Thank you so much.
And to the viewers in North America and around the world, I hope you got some information and some inspiration from this session. I know I did. I mean, absolutely hearing from Magen David Adom personnel and volunteers in Israel, the need is real. And you can see what the website is, AFMDA, that's American Friends of Magen David Adom, afmda.org, where you can donate at this time where the needs are real. To everyone who's joined us today, whether in the audience or those who could contribute so much information, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Please be safe. Shalom.